Sword of the Seven Suns by Gardner F. Fox. Originally published in Planet Stories, Spring 1947. Read by Jon Gill. Part 8. He knew nothing of atomic power, did Flane. But the quick mind of him was alert to the power he held in his palms. Tentatively he pressed the button again and directed the lavender fire, watched it eat up whatever stood in its path. "This is an incredible weapon," he breathed, patting its shiny sides, his eyes dancing. With this in his hands, he could remake a world. Where the violet flame had been was an empty hole. Flame stared into it, seeing twisted girders and gaping hull sides, the black sands below. That was the desert, down there, and something gleamed whitely beneath him. Stretching far out, he scrutinized it. A skeleton lay there, blasted into fragments, scattered apart. At one time, that had been a man. From his position, Flame thought that the spaceship must have killed him, caught him on the sands, and crushed him, throwing his body. Something else shone and glittered down in the sands, something long and bright, and with darkness at one end. Although the darkness glittered, Flame gasped. A sword. He dropped from girder to girder until he stood in the darkness, bending and lifting the thing. In his hand, the blade made a singing play, humming vibrantly. The blade was coated with runes, the figures carved in a delicate frieze in the steel. A craftsman had made that blade, ornamenting it without weakening it. With a big hand on the hilt, Flame danced it before him. The hilt was a dark blue, like a midnight sky. Set inside the translucent crystalline stuff were 7 tiny globules of light that glittered eerily. 5 of them formed a star at the guard, and the other 2 were embedded in the pronged pommel. They made a queer design and reminded Flane of a constellation he could see at night from Clarn. Sarl whinnied alarm somewhere outside. Flane sprang for the girders, sword in belt. He went up the twisted steel, hand over hand, and ran for the opening in the hull, snatching up the flame weapon as he ran. A magnaship was coming from the south. The only known mechanism that did not need the machine to function was the magnaship. It, too, was a discovery of the ancient genius Norda. It utilized the polar magnetism that held the planet in its grip. The red balls that endlessly circled the rim of the ship drew on that stream of magnetism for its power, sent it toward the motors deep in the hull which whirled the propellers. Flane tightened his hands on the gun and waited, watching through thin, slitted eyes as the ship altered course, observing the great wreck. He thought, with this in my hands, I could destroy that ship. The knowledge made him feel like a god. Sorrow nuzzled his back as he stood on the sand, watching men walk toward him. "Are you suspicious, too, Sarl?" he whispered. "We are alone, you and I. The Clarnvra ran us out of Clarn, and there are no others that we know. It is best to be careful." He threw up a palm, calling out, "Stand where you are. You can come no closer." A tall man threw back the hood of his cloak and scowled at him. "You talk big for a man who dwells in a ruined house," Flane spat, saying, "This is no house, fool. It is a ship that came from the sky. I talk big because I am big. I bear death in my palms." The tall man looked interested. Flane saw him study the gun, then looked toward the prism and the ship twisted around it. The man looked back at him. "I would search your house or ship, or whatever it is." Flane shook his head. "Step no closer, or the color that sizzles and eats everything in its path will come out to sear you." The thin man beckoned, and the men with him shed their black cloaks and came for Flane with naked swords in their hands. Flane grinned as they ran toward him. He lifted the gun and aimed it at the cloaks that lay on the sand. The violet light came forth from the gun and stole all around the black cloaks that lay on the sand and ate them up. It ate up some of the sand, too. End of Part 8. Thank you for listening.